I need the Anderson portfolio analysis on my desk by tomorrow morning, Trevor Phillips barked as he breezed past my cubicle. He didn't break stride, didn't even turn his head. The command was a bullet fired over his shoulder, meant to hit its target without the inconvenience of a direct confrontation. His expensive cologne, a sharp, citrusy scent that always seemed to announce his presence before he did, lingered in the air like a ghost of his authority, long after he disappeared into the glass-walled sanctuary of his corner office. I let out a slow, deliberate sigh, my fingers momentarily pausing their dance across the keyboard. Glancing at the digital clock in the corner of my computer screen, I felt a familiar wave of resignation wash over me. 6 p.m. In Houston, that meant the city was just beginning to exhale, the oppressive heat of the day giving way to the electric hum of the evening. For me, it meant another late night loomed, a solitary vigil under the fluorescent lights of North Peak Financial. This request, like so many before it, wasn't a simple task. It would take hours of meticulous data crunching, of sifting through complex market variables and running them through the proprietary models I had spent years of my life perfecting. But that was life at North Peak, a world where the bottom line was the only line that mattered, and time was a currency I was always running out of. As a senior risk analyst, my days, and a significant portion of my nights, were consumed with the intricate art of prediction. I developed the complex mathematical models that were supposed to protect our clients' investments from the market's predatory whims. More importantly, they were designed to protect the firm's bottom line, a sacred trust placed in the hands of analysts like me. My name is Ivy Carter, and for the last 4 years, I had poured every ounce of my intellect and ambition into this firm. The risk assessment models I had developed weren't just tools, they were extensions of my own mind, elegant symphonies of logic and probability that had quietly, without fanfare, become the backbone of our entire operation. They had a precision that bordered on prescient, and my performance reviews reflected it. I was the silent engine in the firm's vast machine, the one who saw the storms on the horizon while others were still basking in the sun. For my dedication, I'd been promised a promotion to director. It was more than a title, it was validation, a testament to the sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends. All I had to do was help navigate the firm through the squall that everyone in the industry knew was coming, a massive market correction that threatened to destabilize even our most profitable portfolios. It was the ultimate test, and my promotion was the prize waiting on the other side. With another, heavier sigh, I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over my sister's name. It was the 3rd time this month I'd had to cancel our dinner plans. "Hey, Vanessa," I began, the lie already forming on my lips. "Rain check for tonight. Trevor just dumped another project on me, again." There was a pause on the other end, heavy with a disappointment that was becoming all too familiar. "Again?" "Ivy, this is the 3rd time this month," she said, her voice a mixture of concern and exasperation. "He's working you to the bone. You can't keep doing this." "I know," I said, trying to inject a note of optimism I didn't feel. "But this could be the catalyst for my promotion. Jonathan Wells himself said so. Once I'm director, things will calm down. I'll have more control, a team. I promise." "That's what you said last year, Ivy," Vanessa replied, her words a gentle but firm reminder of a cycle I seemed unable to break. "Just, don't let them take advantage of you. Your talent is worth more than that." Her words hung in the air as I ended the call, a quiet echo in the now empty office. She was right, of course. But what she didn't fully understand was the thrill of it, the pure, unadulterated joy I found in the work itself. Creating mathematical models that could predict market behavior, that could find order in the absolute chaos of global finance, it gave me a high that few would ever understand. It was a language I was fluent in, a puzzle that I was uniquely gifted at solving. My latest project was my masterpiece. For months, I'd been perfecting a proprietary risk assessment formula, a revolutionary algorithm I called the Adaptive Market Vulnerability Index, or AMVI for short. It was designed to identify exposure to market volatility with an unprecedented, almost frightening, accuracy. It was more than an upgrade to our existing systems, it was a quantum leap forward. It was my magnum opus, the key to my future. As I settled in for another long night, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I glanced toward Trevor's office and saw him watching me through the window, his silhouette a dark shape against the glittering Houston skyline. There was an unsettling intensity in his gaze, a strange mixture of something I couldn't quite place. Was it envy? Or something more calculating? When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before I caught a glimpse of that unsettling expression. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed him eyeing my work with unusual interest, a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I'd always dismissed it as professional jealousy, but now, a colder, more cynical thought began to take root. 2 weeks earlier, I had presented the preliminary results from the AMVI model to the executive team. The room, usually a cacophony of competing egos and loud opinions, had fallen completely silent as I walked them through the mathematics. My slides were a cascade of elegant equations and stark, undeniable data, showing how the AMVI had predicted several recent market anomalies that every one of our traditional models, and our competitors, had completely missed. Even our normally reserved CEO, Jonathan Wells, a man who looked like he was carved from granite and wore his authority like a bespoke suit, leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the screen. He was a legend in the industry, a shark who could smell blood in the water from a mile away. His attention was a rare and valuable commodity. "Impressive work, Ivy," he'd said, his voice a low rumble of approval. "If this performs as well as you believe, it could save us millions when the correction hits." At that moment, Trevor, who had been sitting silently beside me, had smiled tightly. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look like mentorship but felt like an act of branding. "That's why I've been mentoring her, Jonathan," Trevor announced to the room, his voice oozing a false sincerity that made my stomach churn. I knew she was on to something special. I'd kept my expression neutral, a carefully constructed mask of professional deference, though inside, I was seething. Trevor had done nothing of the sort. He hadn't mentored me, he'd managed me, and poorly at that. He'd repeatedly questioned the validity of my approach, dismissing my initial theories as academically interesting but practically useless, until the preliminary results proved too compelling to ignore. He had been a roadblock, not a guide. I had developed the AMVI not because of him, but in spite of him. Now, as I dove into the Anderson portfolio, that memory sharpened the unease I felt under his watchful eye. Something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to protect myself and my work, before it was too late. The market correction hit harder and faster than anyone anticipated. It was a bloodbath. Over 3 tumultuous days, global markets plunged, sending investors into a panic-fueled frenzy. Emergency meetings filled North Peak's conference rooms, the air thick with tension and the frantic energy of analysts scrambling to assess the damage. The firm was hemorrhaging money. But amidst the chaos, something remarkable happened. The portfolios I had quietly restructured using my AMVI model held steady. While our competitors were reporting massive, crippling losses, our most critical assets, the ones I had shielded, were not just surviving, they were outperforming market benchmarks by staggering margins. North Peak's exposure was minimal, a small flesh wound in an arena of fatal blows. By Friday afternoon, it was clear. My model had just saved the firm tens of millions of dollars. I expected celebration, a recognition of the work that had single-handedly kept us afloat. I expected the promotion announcement, the one I had been working toward for 4 long years. Instead, Trevor called me into his office and closed the door. The triumphant smirk he wore was one I had seen before, but never directed at me with such personal satisfaction. "The executive team is thrilled with the performance of our risk management strategy," he said, leaning back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It was his power pose, the one he adopted when he was about to deliver what he considered a masterstroke. "Our strategy. I'll be briefing the board on Monday about how we navigated the correction." "We?" I almost choked on the word. That's great, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I prepared a detailed report showing exactly how the AMBI model identified. No need, Trevor interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. He slid a single-page document across the polished mahogany of his desk. I've already compiled everything the board needs to see. This is the press release going out tomorrow. I'd like you to review it for any technical inaccuracies. I picked up the document. My heart sank with each paragraph I scanned. The release detailed North Peak's innovative new risk assessment strategy, the groundbreaking methodology that had safeguarded client assets. It credited the visionary leadership of Trevor Phillips, head of risk management, for developing the approach. My name, Ivy Carter, appeared nowhere in the document. He hadn't just taken my work, he had erased me from it. There seems to be an oversight, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the glass wall behind him. I placed the paper back on his desk. The AMVI model was my development. Trevor's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were cold, flat, and dismissive. As head of the department, Ivy, all work produced under my supervision falls under my purview, he responded smoothly, the corporate jargon a shield for his blatant theft. The model was refined and implemented with my guidance and authority. But I created the core algorithm, and... Ivy, he cut me off, his voice hardening into a blade. You're an employee of North Peak. Your work belongs to the firm. And as your supervisor, I determine how it's presented to the board and the public. You'll be acknowledged within the department, of course. In fact, he added, a final twist of the knife, I've approved a modest bonus for your contribution. I bit the inside of my cheek, the sharp pain a welcome anchor in the swirling vortex of my rage. This wasn't just about credit anymore. It was about my career, my future. The director promotion I'd been working toward, the one that was supposed to be my reward for this very success, would now certainly go to him. He had won. I understand, I said finally, my voice a dead monotone. I stood up, my movements stiff. I'll make sure the Anderson portfolio metrics are updated for your presentation. Excellent, he said, turning back to his computer, already dismissing me. Now, I need you to explain the stress test parameters you used. The board will have questions, and I want to be thoroughly prepared. For the next hour, I walked Trevor through the technical details of my model. My model. I answered his questions, explained the nuances of the algorithm, and watched as he took careful, copious notes. Notes he would use to present my work as his own. As I spoke, a plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise as one of my own algorithms. Trevor might believe he had won, but he had overlooked one crucial detail about me, a detail I had learned from a bitter former colleague who had suffered a similar fate at his hands. I never left myself unprotected. 3 months earlier, working with a patent attorney friend on evenings and weekends, I had filed for trademark protection on the core mathematical formula that powered the AMBI model. The application had been carefully worded to cover the unique algorithm itself, while excluding any proprietary North Peak data or specific implementations. According to the fine print in my employment contract, the very contract Trevor was now hiding behind, general mathematical concepts I developed on my own time, using my personal equipment, were not automatically company property. Only their specific application to company systems was. The trademark had been granted 2 weeks ago. When I left Trevor's office that evening, I walked back to my desk, sat down, and began to compose an email. The subject line read, "Resignation effective immediately." In the body, I laid out my departure and attached a formal notification to the CEO, HR, and the entire board. The notification stated that any continued use of the AMBI methodology would require proper licensing from its registered trademark holder, me. I scheduled the email to be sent automatically at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. The weekend was the longest of my life. I spent it with Vanessa, who, after my tearful confession, became my rock. We went through every possible scenario, but my resolve never wavered. On Monday morning, I didn't go to the office. Instead, I went to a small coffee shop downtown. At precisely 9 a.m., I felt a subtle vibration from my phone in my pocket, confirming the automated email had been sent. The real battle was about to begin. The first call was from Trevor, less than a minute later. "Ivy, what the hell is this? Call me immediately." His voicemail was a frantic, panicked screech. Then came another, and another. 6 missed calls from him in 10 minutes. Then came HR, their tone more measured but equally urgent. Then, a text from Jonathan Wells himself: "Ivy, I'm concerned by your sudden resignation and the claims regarding AMBI ownership. I'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss this directly before matters escalate further. Please call my assistant to arrange a meeting today." This was unexpected. In all my planning, I hadn't considered that the CEO might reach out personally. I hesitated, then decided that speaking with Wells could provide valuable insight into how the company planned to respond. I typed a careful reply. "Mr. Wells, I'm available to meet at 2 p.m. today. At Patricia Winter's office. She will be present as my legal counsel." I included the address of my attorney's high-rise office, then pressed send. As I finished my coffee, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Carter? This is Elaine Brenner, Chief Operating Officer at Veltri Dynamics," a smooth, professional voice said. "I understand you have something interesting to discuss with us. Tomorrow, perhaps? Given recent developments, I'm wondering if you might be available today instead." The news of my resignation and trademark claim had leaked and was spreading through the financial industry like wildfire. Somehow, and I had my suspicions about who was responsible, Veltri Dynamics, North Peak's largest competitor, already knew. My phone had been buzzing with notifications from financial news apps all morning, with headlines ranging from risk model ownership dispute rocks North Peak Financial to the more dramatic mathematical mutiny, analyst claims ownership of market-beating formula. "I appreciate your interest," I replied to Elaine, setting my portfolio on the polished conference table of my attorney's office. "Though I confess, I'm curious how you learned about the situation so quickly." Elaine smiled. "Houston's financial community is smaller than it appears. When someone develops a risk model that outperforms the market by 23% during a correction, people notice. When that same person then claims independent ownership of the methodology." She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Let's just say my phone started ringing before the markets opened." For the next hour, I presented the AMBI methodology to Veltri's executive team. I explained the core algorithm, demonstrated its performance, and outlined potential applications, all while carefully avoiding any proprietary North Peak information, exactly as my trademark application had been worded. When I concluded, the room erupted in applause, followed by a barrage of questions that reflected genuine, deep interest. Later that afternoon, at precisely 2 p.m., Patricia's assistant ushered in the CEO of North Peak Financial. To my surprise, he came alone. No Trevor. No legal team. Just Jonathan Wells in his impeccable suit, carrying a slim leather portfolio. "Miss Carter," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. And Miss Winters, I've heard excellent things about your work." After introductions, Wells settled into his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'll be direct," he began. "Your resignation and trademark claim have created a significant situation for North Peak. Before our respective legal teams turn this into a protracted battle, I wanted to understand your perspective personally." Patricia nodded for me to respond. "I developed the core AMBI algorithm independently," I stated, my voice even. "While I implemented it at North Peak using company data and systems, the underlying mathematical formula remains my intellectual property. When Trevor claimed full credit for my work and received a promotion based on that misrepresentation, I felt I had no choice but to protect my interests." Wells listened without interrupting, then opened his portfolio and removed a document. "This morning," he said, "our technical team attempted to update the model parameters without your guidance. they encountered significant difficulties understanding the core algorithm. He looked up, his gaze direct. It seems Trevor cannot explain how the model actually works. A moment of silence filled the room as the implication settled. Trevor had claimed credit for a model he couldn't even explain. "Mr. Wells," Patricia interjected, her tone crisp. "While this information is illuminating, it doesn't change the fundamental issue. My client has valid trademark protection for the core AMBI methodology. Any continued use by North Peak would require proper licensing." Wells nodded slowly. "I understand. But before we discuss licensing terms, I have a different proposition to consider." He turned to face me directly. "Ivy, I'd like to offer you the position of Executive Director of Innovation at North Peak, reporting directly to me. The role would include full credit for the AMBI model, a substantial compensation package, and autonomy to build your own team." The room suddenly felt very still. This was nowhere in my planned scenarios. "And Trevor?" I asked. "Mr. Phillips is no longer with North Peak as of this morning," Wells replied, his face unreadable. "His misrepresentation of your work was grounds for immediate termination." I felt a rush of pure, sweet vindication, quickly followed by a dizzying sense of uncertainty. I had been so focused on my exit strategy, on my revenge, that I hadn't considered the possibility of a better position at North Peak itself. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "But there's something you should know. I've already had preliminary discussions with Veltri Dynamics about licensing AMBI." The next morning, financial news outlets exploded with headlines. "North Peak announces new Executive Director of Innovation," one read. "Risk model creator promoted after ownership dispute," declared another. And my personal favorite, "Trevor Phillips out at North Peak amid intellectual property controversy." After intense negotiations that lasted well into the evening, I had accepted Jonathan Wells's offer, with several key conditions. First, North Peak would publicly acknowledge me as the sole creator of the AMBI methodology. Second, I would retain personal trademark ownership while granting North Peak exclusive implementation rights. And finally, I would have complete autonomy over a newly formed innovation division, with a substantial budget and staffing authority. It was far more than I had initially hoped for when I'd planned my departure. As I rode the elevator to my new executive suite on North Peak's top floor, I could hardly believe how dramatically the situation had reversed. My new office, Trevor's former space, had already been cleared of his belongings. The spectacular view of downtown Houston spread before me as I set down my bag and took a seat behind the expansive desk. My journey from overlooked analyst to executive had taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. In the world of finance, the most powerful asset isn't money or connections. It's owning your intellectual capital, and knowing exactly when, and how, to leverage it.